We'll hold for just a moment before I call the study session to order. I'd like the town administrator to be here. Though I do have the eminently capable deputy town administrator, but we'll just wait for 1 minute. Okay, study session, Town Board, Estes Park, January 28th, 2025. This session is now called to order. Our first topic is the scoping project for capacity improvements on the Big Thompson River, and it runs off the screen at that point. Probably Fall River, I suppose, is the other piece.
Absolutely.
And, Jennifer, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Trustees. I'm Jennifer Waters, Civil Engineer in Public Works, former space heater queen in the town, and present project manager for this scoping project study. So on behalf of Public Works and the consultant team for the scoping project, we appreciate your interest in this second study session. The first study session was 4 months ago on September 10th. So for anyone listening and participating who is not familiar, I just want to say that this project is not a current or imminent construction project. It is a study which began 1.5 years ago. The study is funded through a FEMA grant for flood mitigation assistance, which aims to reduce or eliminate the risk of repetitive flood damage to buildings and structures insurable under the NFIP. As you know, the town has participated in the NFIP since the 1970s. I just looked on the database available for me to show the number of flood insurance policies in force in the town of Estes Park. And as of December 31st, 2024, there are 141 policies in effect. Of course, that does not include the unincorporated area of Larimer County. That is a separate policy count. So Public Works was awarded the FMA grant in 2022 following a successful application for fiscal year 2020 funding. The grant is administered directly by the Colorado Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, DHSEM. So public funding for this project is $410,625. The town's match is $136,875. We have been reimbursed by DHSEM for $90,631 so far. The project will be concluded in less than 3 months by April 20th. By that time, GEI will have furnished the deliverables, which are a technical report and 30% design drawings. When and if the town chooses to do so, this package may be submitted with an application for a construction grant to completely design and build the capacity improvements, which have been modeled to mitigate flooding by decreasing the coverage of the special flood hazard area in the vicinity of East Elkhorn Avenue and the Fall River Corridor up to the Moraine Bridge. So the report and the drawings are durable, and these will be referenced as development decisions are made in the project boundary. When the next flood occurs, which may happen before the capacity improvements are constructed, Estes Park will be ready with this vision for downtown capacity improvements and resilience. So you may rely on Public Works for ongoing awareness of potential grant opportunities, not only for design and construction for the next of the capacity improvements, but also for studying another area, such as upstream on the Fall River where the bridge near the water wheel spans. It spans over West Elkhorn. Also, the Black Canyon Creek watershed, it would be a good study area. One of our public members who has been engaged with this study expressed a strong interest that we study the Black Canyon Creek as well. Since the previous study session in September, coordination with stakeholders included a meeting with staff from both sanitary sewer districts in November. On December 19th, Public Works staff and the GEI team traveled on foot along the Fall River corridor while discussing conceptual design alternatives. At the western end of the project area, by arrangement with the Park Theater Mall property owners, entry in the crawl space of the structures provided the opportunity to gather information needed to finalize the conceptual design. We also discussed with the Park Theater Mall owners the pedestrian access to the Park Theater Mall businesses. So you will now see the results of this guidance in the upcoming presentation by our consultant. GEI is represented today by the team members who have been working on this study. Dr. Michael Skurlock has been a presenter at both public meetings as well as the previous study session.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Jennifer. Let me extend my gratitude to everyone for letting me come back and speak with you again. It's been a pleasure working with Public Works and Estes Park Engineering through this whole process. And with me today, Natalie Youngblood from GEI, Sarah Skegan-Kerr, GEI, Lucy Harrington, also GEI, and Chris Pauley with Galloway Engineering. So they might be speaking depending on the questions and feedback that we receive. The village of consultants that have been working on this project aren't limited to GEI and Galloway. We've had Michael Baker working with us on the FEMA pieces. They're experts in some of the hazard mitigation estimates and grants. We have a construction partner, JHL, who has been helping with how much things are going to cost, how long things are going to take to build. Kearns and West was involved as a facilitator for some of the earlier public outreach events that we conducted. So I have 5 sections here to get through. Pretty standard stuff with the presentation purposes, which is where we're at right now. We'll kind of go through the project again, why we're doing what we're doing. We identified a few alternatives. I'll be focusing on the preferred alternative only. With that preferred alternative is a lot of opportunities that we presented last time, so we'll kind of revisit some of what those look like and then where we're headed next. So if you recall, back in September, we went through the project and we presented some prompts, and one of them was to request if an additional session would be beneficial to discuss the trail concepts moving west up Fall River towards Moraine Avenue. As Jennifer mentioned, we have done some field reconnaissance and survey efforts and have a good working alternative for that trail section, which I will present later. But that's kind of the main focus here, is to get to that. Okay, so the project as a whole, we're here to identify feasible alternatives that improve channel capacity to reduce flooding damages. Feasible, again, for this project is something that we can actually go out and build that is affordable within the grant programs, that really adheres to the things that make Estes Park great and works with the community vision. We're going to do this project by improving channel capacity That is one way to reduce flooding damages. There's two perfectly good rivers out there. We're going to try our best to make them work for the floods that come through them. Flooding damages in the study have been defined as physical, so directly to the buildings themselves. These can also include things like economic disruption to tourism, utility disruptions, anything caused by the water itself. So our study goals were to basically decrease how often and how severe the flooding events hit the town. So reduce property damage, improve public safety are the main goals here. The study project that is looking at those goals is also leading towards securing BRIC funding, the opportunity for BRIC funding. BRIC stands for Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. It's a FEMA grant program. This project is checking all the boxes of the purpose of that grant, specifically community resilience, mitigating these hazards, infrastructure improvement, and using nature-based solutions. Those are solutions focused on increasing the environmental resiliency and function within the river systems. The two main hurdles for this BRIC funding are presented at the bottom of the slide. There's a BCA, a benefit cost analysis. This is basically ensuring that the overall project cost is worth it for FEMA. So the benefit of the project is outweighing the upfront costs. The EHP, the environmental and historic preservation, is a set of guidelines and basically hurdles that you have to get through to make sure that the project is going to be able to be permitted to make sure it's worth the grant money. I'm happy to report that both of these have been successfully completed. We have a benefit cost ratio that is much larger than a 1, which is what we need it to be. And we have all the permits in hand that we need, pass to the permits in hand that we need to secure the EHP go ahead. Okay, so what does the project look like? As we discussed last time, there's a series of bridges in town that become pressurized when the water comes up. They're very low bridges. In order to allow for the floodwaters to pass safely underneath them, we need to increase the capacity below the bridges. Fortunately, there's about a 10-foot drop in the channel below Riverside Drive. The preferred alternative, we looked at a lot of different ones. The preferred alternative was to redistribute this grade moving upstream up the Big Thompson River and the Fall River to get capacity under the bridges. So on the Big Thompson River, the left image on the screen here is showing the flood event that would be coming down the Big Thompson at the 100-year. The yellow is the flooding extents after the project. The blue is the flooding extents before the project. The black line going down the Big Thompson can translate over to the graph on the right. And you can see that the existing bed, it's kind of the middle black line, is going to be lowered to the proposed bed, which is the lower black line. The lowest red line has the difference in channel bed, and it's displayed on the right vertical axis. So if we're looking at about 10 feet of cut, taking that drop and pulling it back underneath the bridges. So the top two lines here are showing the water surface elevation at the big flood event. Under the existing condition, you can see that the water's overtopping both bridges. The proposed alternative brings the water surface underneath that. The Fall River generates its own 100-year storm and flood. This is the same graph focused on that event. The regrade depth, so that bottom red line starts down at -10 and then approaches 0 as we move upstream. So we eventually get back to the existing river, pretty close to the slab property that's identified in the figure.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? Can you redefine to me what the difference between proposed bed and regrade depth is?
Absolutely. So the proposed bed would be the channel bed after the project has been constructed. The regrade depth would be the difference between what's out there today and the proposed bed. So there's on the right side of this graph here, there's a channel difference axis, and it goes from 30 to -10. So there's a much larger difference down at the confluence of the two rivers that approaches 0 as we move upstream.
Got it.
It's okay to ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
So you said on Fall River, the deepening would go up to about where the slab is?
Yes.
What about on the Big Thompson? How far upstream does it start, the lowering start?
Yeah, let me go back a slide for you. So we are, we call it catching grade. So that will occur basically between the Ivy and the Rockwell Street bridges. So out there today, there's kind of a flat water area. So that'll be a little bit swifter in appearance after the project's completed. Okay. One of the things that we were focused on with this study was making sure that we had future resiliency for the projects that could be planned moving forward. The water wheel up at West Elkhorn Avenue is one of the main culprits for diverting water out onto the road. In order to take the water from the water wheel and put it back into Fall River, the channel has to have the capacity to hold the water. So this project will achieve that. Future projects that will divert the water off, these downtown main corridor roads will be capably handled by these channel improvements. So the figure here is showing what a future condition could look like. Again, the blue is the existing floodplain, and the yellow is the possibility of kind of the future projects were enacted. Okay, so
Hold a second.
Yes, sir.
This is where I get confused. And when 4 months ago, when we looked at this again, were we to do the project as currently envisioned, this feasible future alternative, the yellow, that's what the floodplain would look like in a 100-year flood. And what about the blue? The blue doesn't go away. The blue would still exist in that 100-year flood unless we do other projects to remediate that?
So there's the interpretation of the figure in front of you is that the yellow would be the future flood limits following all the capacity improvement projects. There are benefits from this project as well, but they don't extend out to the water wheel project area.
And so if we just did the first project and not the other envisioned phases, if you will, or projects, that blue floodplain still happens when we get the next 100-year flood, even after this first project is done.
In some areas, yes. In other areas, there are noticeable improvements. So I'll back up a slide. So this is the blue to yellow here is this project. So that, again, this is the Fall River. So you're seeing flooding through the parking areas at Rockwell. You're seeing flooding at Moraine Street. All of that is now brought into the Fall River.
This solves that piece. Now go ahead to that next slide again. And so that lower blue stuff down there would go away, right? Or does that still exist after Project 1?
The water that extends out onto West Elkhorn from the water wheel is not solved by the current study.
But the lower stuff down by Rockwell,
This is, I think, if I may, because I had a similar question. I think what we talked about in September, right, was that it's a, first we talked about Big Thompson, and then we discussed how that would be, in theory, step one, and there would also have to be the water wheel piece with the Fall River being part of that conversation.
right?
And then later, we'd have to consider some of the stuff downstream then, right? Like, I think that came up too. So I think this, I wanted to confirm that first of all. And second of all, then I think what you're saying is any sort of flood issues that come from the Big Thompson side in that first slide, that blue area, the first slide, would be hopefully somewhat mitigated, but all the other water coming from Fall River would also be a factor that we have to consider, which is why it's the two steps,
Yeah,
right?
it'd just be nice for me to see the difference of if we did this project, just this one, what does it solve? What goes away? Which parts of the blue disappear? But I'm getting confused on yellow and blue. Anyway, enough question. That's maybe I'll have a conversation with Jennifer sometime. In an hour, she can get me through my thickness on this.
Greg's like sitting up on his chair. I don't know if he wants to comment. Greg's about to fly out of his chair. I just want to let you know that it's
I agree,
happening.
because that's the same area.
It's the same blue.
I think I can address this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, this project does improvements up to Moraine, okay? Right here. See how the cursor on the screen? The blue in this area goes away by virtue of this project.
That's what I want to
That's-
see
that's-
go away on the
That's the
picture.
previous slide that Michael showed.
Yeah.
This
Okay.
blue goes away. This slide shows that the diminishment, the yellow, will extend all the way off the screen.
Right.
Someday in the future, when another project occurs that takes care of channel widening on Fall River from Moraine up to Elkhorn and replaces the bridge at the water wheel. Until that happens, while this blue goes away here around Rockwell, the blue on Elkhorn does not go away until additional projects occur.
Correct. Got it.
Did that clarify?
Yeah, I'm just looking for where the blue disappears
Right?
after Project 1.
And that would be the previous slide.
Yeah.
Yeah. Make sense?
Can you describe that, though? Can you give that to us in a nutshell? What is so we're talking about this project that is the lower half, and there's another project someday in the future, maybe, probably, possibly.
Or projects.
What is that scope? What's that scope in time and money? And yeah, I appreciate that, but I also, the other question I have is there additional capacity? Is the physical issue that box culvert at West Elkhorn that is preventing water from staying in the channel and then it rides over Elkhorn? I've heard that several
Yes,
times.
that is a true statement.
If that box culvert was as a short-term solution to everything west of Moraine that would bring that water into the channel, and there is more capacity there than the box culvert would allow, would that allow us to get the water to impact less of town if there was a similar flood event that occurred that affected that part of the river?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, the answer is yes. And this takes us back to the 2018 Stormwater Master Plan. That project has a spreadsheet in there that identifies all the capital projects that are needed within the study area. So while this exhibit talks about reductions in the floodplain within the limits of this photograph, there are additional improvements further upstream that are outlined in the Stormwater Master Plan.
I
So the
understand that,
purpose of
and I
this-
understand the approach of starting low, so you have the capacity for when you increase it. But it is not just my original idea that a solution, some type of a solution of replacing that box culvert would have a substantial mitigating impact on commercial exposure in that part of our most dense part of the community. So I wonder if that short-term solution may be part of another project to give us a little leg up on, I mean, what's the objective here? What are we trying to do? Minimize,
The objective here is to create capacity.
to minimize loss in the event of a flood.
Exactly.
Yep. So
Greg, I
that's where
think
I'm
maybe
going.
what we're missing here is I don't think we will be allowed to do anything with that box culvert unless there's the capacity downstream that enables that project. So if we applied and tried to get approval to do the box culvert project, they'd say no, because you don't have the capacity downstream to alleviate the flooding concerns. So you'd just be sending more, you'd create a bigger issue somewhere else, and that's not permitted under the floodplain regulations.
So by regulation and technically, we're not allowed to do it, but there is additional capacity downstream from that box culvert.
There
If-
additional. What do
Yeah,
you
I don't
mean?
want to belabor
Yeah.
this point, but there are other, I think that it would be beneficial for us to have that whole idea of what this whole plan looks like when we're talking about just a little piece of the project here. It's a
And-
big deal.
And we do have that entire
and I've
picture.
looked-
It's in the Stormwater Master
I've
Plan.
Tried to go through it, and it's a big one.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we talked about, we don't need to replace that, but that box culvert is actually plugged up because we had to limit the capacity there for the downstream, as I remember it.
Well, now you've switched subject, Chair, and you've moved to the Moraine Bridge.
Right,
And so the reason the Moraine Bridge has baffles in it is for the reason Travis talked
Right.
about. We can't send more water downstream in a channel that can't handle it, because then we're going to create new flooding in someone else's backyard.
but if we do these lower projects, we can open that.
Precisely, that's the
We
reason
can
we
take those
work.
baffles out, which would help improve Fall River to the west.
Yes,
It wouldn't back up because.
Yes.
And it wouldn't take a new bridge, it just takes taking out that restriction out.
that will help, but you have
But we
to.
still have the problem with the water wheel bridge, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the pinch right there.
So that, whatever we do, it has to start downstream and work our way up.
You're exactly correct. Yep.
So my interruption managed to turn your first 4 slides into the first half hour of the presentation, and I see you still have a lot more to go through.
I can speed it up. The feedback is
roll.
absolutely welcome. Dr. Mahonen, thank you for moving to the front row. So with this project comes a lot of opportunities for the town. Again, it's a major civil project. There's going to be things to rework to make all of these channel features work with the town. So here's a map of a couple things. The colors in this map are showing kind of how the water is going to be distributed under kind of the normal flow. So the arrows are showing the direction. The redder colors are faster. There's going to be, some kind of milder whitewater. You're going to introduce some like rapid noises to town. This is not going to be like a destination whitewater feature by any means, but it's going to be really good habitat for the species that like this type of thing, and should be a really good opportunity for people to interact with the water. Because of the drop in the channel grade, especially at the confluence area, there's going to be some reimagining of how some of these areas interact with the water line. We showed you last time some artistic renderings of the Hicks Plaza. Have that on the next slide coming up as well. The confluence area itself will also be reimagined a little bit to have people get down to the water. Of course, we're going to be trying to minimize disruption to the mature trees there, the aesthetic of that confluence park. These are jewels of the town that we would like to preserve as much as we can. I have these prepared later if anyone would like to see zoom ins. The upper right picture kind of gives you a guide on where these perspectives are looking. The number one is looking downstream past the confluence towards a new pedestrian bridge. The middle one is number 3. It's looking at the envisioned access from Hicks Park. And 2 is kind of what the confluence area could look like. A key piece of this project is following from the 2016 and 2018 trails plans. This project aims to bring the trails corridor along the south bank through the center of the confluence zone and connect all the way out to Moraine Avenue. So this is the rendering from the 2016 plan, and this is the rendering from the 2018 plan. The bottom right here has this kind of multi-use split between bikes and pedestrians. Those were the concrete blockouts that Director Mahonen just mentioned. And that was kind of the objective of the trails piece, was to conform and really meet these visions. So here's the alignment that we have currently. I'll kind of walk from the downstream portion and move upstream. So there's going to be a connection to the pedestrian bridge that goes over the Big Thompson River downstream of US 36. It's going to go underneath the bridge, where it will connect to another bike trail that meets the highway. The plan is to come along kind of the natural grades on the south bank until we get to the kind of big rock outcropping as you get kind of closer to the current bathroom across the river. The trail will pass over on the bridge that was shown in the previous rendering, then go underneath Riverside over a new pedestrian bridge, and then travel on the south bank of Fall River until it meets the Moraine Avenue underpass. We showed this slide on the last presentation. This is Section A. Section A is underneath Riverside. This is going to be similar to the one under the US 36 bridge. There'll be these separation walls that will keep the water off the path. We're meeting design guidelines recommended by AASHTO, which is a really standard way of doing this. So we're trying to maximize clearance for vertical, trying to get the most width that makes sense, and have the mildest grades basically where we can. The town's very constrained. It's a very tight corridor. So there's going to be a couple excavations and maneuvering that happens, but we're trying to make this work as best as we can. All right, so we are now entering new terrain that you haven't seen before. If you remember from the last presentation, we kind of ended in this area, and the direction was to come back and present this corridor as it moves left. So the next few slides will kind of discuss these areas in detail. Walking through this piece, it's going to come out from underneath Riverside. We're going to cross a bridge, come along again the south side, and then there's going to be a split in the path. One path is going to drop down below to connect to the underpass of Moraine. One path is going to remain high and allow for a connection to a new bridge that goes to the town center. On the north side of Fall River, so that's the river left, this is the pedestrian area. The trail will exit from the underpass and climb up this wall and meet either the existing grade here. Another option is to coordinate with the property owner and have this trail kind of come along the perimeter of this polygon here. So the next slide series, we'll kind of go through these in detail. The crossing, these are kind of what it looks like today. The new landing here will be pretty close to where some of these rock outcroppings are. Again, there's been a lot of consideration on how to preserve what is out there, and we're doing our best. There's going to have to be some disruption of some of these rock features to have the landing, but it's going to meet here and keep traversing west. This area is what Jennifer was discussing in the introduction. This is the crawl space underneath the existing walkway in front of the Park Theater Mall. The plan currently is to remove this wall, engage this area as part of the active river, and have the bike path utilize that as shown here. So it's going to kind of come down to the south and then move into the underpass. We've coordinated pretty closely with the property owner. There's some aesthetics, such as maintaining these rock facades that are really important to them. We're going to try our best to reflect that in the designs. Another thing to note here is the slope of this walkway. It's very steep. The building exits are along that walkway, and we're somewhat constrained by that. So I'll show you this next kind of set of plans that'll maybe hopefully address some of the questions that would come up. All right, so this is a section view here of what this could look like. A bicyclist would be where my cursor is here. This is the channel bottom, and we're not proposing any channel modifications here. So this is what's out there today. The wall that will be necessary underneath this kind of cantilever path is to keep the water out of this. The channel's pretty low, and the bike path's going to be right next to it. 8 feet clearance is acceptable. So that is the vertical clearance here, and then over here on the right is the pedestrian walkway that's going to be kind of coming up this wall here. Okay. All right, so we're kind of moving downstream. I'm going to try to draw this with the cursor here. So this lowering limb of the trail here would be coming down kind of along this wall here. We'd be re-envisioning some of how these trees interplayed with the river. We'd have an opportunity to make this a really nice looking spot. New bridge here coming across. The bridge that this picture is taken from would have to be removed. That one would be removed.
Wait,
So-
can you say that one more time? The one that we're looking at would be replaced, and the one that you're standing on would be removed, or the one we're looking at would be removed?
So this red one here would be a removal. That's the bridge that
That
the
one,
picture's
okay.
standing on. This would be a brand-new bridge
Okay.
that would arc
That's that
across the
one. Thank
river
you.
like this. You bet. Okay, so this is what the CAD profiles look along the trail. So I'm moving left to right here. That's going up the Fall River. So Moraine is over here. So I would be coming up. I would be dropping down on my bicycle. About right here, I would be encountering that wall and be behind it. And then I would be underneath the pedestrian access at this point here. So this would have a slight rise to get me up to the existing pedestrian underpass, and I would be on my way to the future portions of this project up the Fall River. So above, again, this is pretty much just the existing sidewalk grade. Again, the buildings come out at this grade, so it's difficult to change without discussion with the property owner. But there's kind of some steeper grades and adverse grades here. Some of this is advantageous for drainage, but we're a little constrained as far as vertical goes in that location. All right, I'm going to pause there because I'm about to move into utilities, and I know that was the first time you've seen that. So any feedback would be appreciated.
What is the, if you use percentages, what's the difference or what's the ratio of trails and recreation opportunities versus strictly capacity and improvements?
As far as like the economics of the
Well,
project?
yeah, I get that what this is, it's billed as capacity improvements and it's an opportunity to meet the objectives of other plans. I understand that completely. If we were going after this from a perspective of improving the capacity, what is that? Is that 60% of this and there's 40% trails and recreational opportunity, or how does it split off the top of your head?
Sure. So I'm interpreting the question as like, how will this be perceived by the BRIC application?
You engineers repeat everything. This is Director Mahonen all over again. You're very good at clarifying the question. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, sure. I would say that it's probably 80-20.
Okay.
The flood piece for Estes is a unique situation for your town. And like the real project here is solving that problem. The trails piece of this is great because, you know, the tourist nature and just, you know, the beautiful circulation and stuff that you guys have going on here.
Yeah, that you answered. Thank you.
You bet.
Couple hopefully simple questions. So on the I think it was the previous slide that you had said the vertical was 8 feet. That's kind of standard for the bike path side. Is that like what you would see on the Spring Creek Trail in Fort Collins or something like that, where that's the height generally?
Yeah.
Ish.
Recommendations are, you know, if you can get 10 feet, it's better.
Okay.
So 8 feet's.
But you're not suggesting that 10 feet's necessarily possible, or?
10 feet's not possible.
Okay.
8 feet's allowable.
Okay.
There's going to be pieces of the trail, especially with the grades, that are going to fall in the same criteria.
Okay.
So it's going to be not ideal, but it's going to be permittable.
So a minimum of 8 feet. Are there areas would it would be above that?
Yes, there
Okay.
will be areas above that.
And then, could you pop back a couple slides for me, please? Would you mind? I just want to make sure I understand. Sure, that's fine. So, well, actually, maybe one more, please. Yeah. So on the south side, we're talking, that's the bike lane that we're talking about. That's the 8 feet, and that would allow for overflow for some of those like 10-year flood event type things, right? And then the right side or the north side, I'm saying left and right because I'm looking upstream, but that then you said kind of traverses up and connects back to the proposed bridge or whatever. That also would allow for additional capacity if the river, like, so all of this is built to be traversed on a normal day, but expands the capacity for the river if we see a flood event?
The bike trail, absolutely. The pedestrian trail will be the opposite, but it's going to be designed in a way that functions with the flood.
Can you say more about that?
Yes, yes. I'll try to point at stuff. I feel like maybe that's helpful. So we're going to be taking this lower wall out. That's reflected by this expansion. So like an 8 feet widening of this channel is significant. Okay, so that's going to help us quite a bit. This pedestrian walkway here is going to be likely cantilevered off of the existing concrete. So that is seen as a obstruction by the water.
Right.
So we're going to have to be offsetting that by this south side expansion.
And the reason I ask is so, because I love, especially when we were talking about the Riverside Bridge, that, you know, it's like, I don't know if anybody else thinks this way, but I grew up in the era of when Titanic came out, and like they talk about, you know, when the ship, the water goes over the top and over the top, right? So that it would be more even. That's what I envision for that, like it going over the top. But if it doesn't have anywhere to go, then does it wipe out that pedestrian side, which you are all way more intelligent than I am when it comes to things like that. But that's where I'm wondering is what happens to those if we do have a serious flood event? Is it going to cream out that pedestrian area, or is the idea that hopefully how much we've mitigated on the other side keeps it from behaving that way?
Yeah, good questions. So the pedestrian path, both of these paths will have a limit about the 10-year where they're going to not be accessed by people.
Right.
Right, and it's going to be up to the town to go maybe
Manage
close them
that, right.
and manage that. All the structures that we're going to propose are going to be considering making sure things don't get creamed.
Yeah, that's the whole point, right?
Okay.
Okay, but that brings me to my third question, then I'll hand off the mic, is the design built in a way that mitigation, or not, management, sorry, of those areas for if or when we experience flood events are more logically implementable? Like, are they set up in a way that it's easy for the town to say, cutting off those areas so that they're not a safety hazard for people?
Yeah, so I'll say we're definitely considering maintenance and access, and I think it's fair to say we've been coordinating with Public Works on the design. So
Okay.
yeah, it's
Okay,
definitely a
thanks.
consideration.
Just to go back to what you said on that 8-foot section that you're going to remove the concrete, and you said then it would be able to expand 8 feet. But the riverbed isn't getting expanded by 8 feet. It's that is the bike area. Is it? Not?
Yeah, so also great question. So the flood event that we're most concerned about is this 100-year occurrence storm. Sorry, the house is a little slow. So above about the 10-year, the water will enter this channel.
Okay. Just kind of back. Okay.
Yep, and it's going to be the same thing at Riverside. So we have plans in place to get rid of the water once that's happened too.
Okay. So it's doing double duty, basically. Okay. Thank you for that explanation.
I'm just going to call attention to our time. We had allotted an hour to this. I know you have a lot of other material. I believe the deliverable at the end of this is going to be to ask the board whether we want to proceed with the 30% drawings or whatever. And just keeping an eye to that, we can proceed on this detailed view, but we're going to run out of time before getting through all of those different components, I think. So continue on, and I'll let you know when we get to that.
Appreciate that. All right, I'm going to move on to our utilities discussion, which I think can remain brief. If I can figure out how to do it. Okay. Utilities, there's constraints and opportunities for these. The constraints first, there's sewer crossings that go beneath the river that are going to be basically above the cut that we're proposing. So we've been talking with both sanitary districts and have come up with a plan that's amenable for both of them. That plan is to reroute the main lines within the trail corridor along the south part of the Big Thompson. Those would flow by gravity down and basically pick up in their existing network down by US 36. In order to achieve that, there's going to be a small underground lift station over by Rockwell Street, specifically for Estes Park sanitation. So that's kind of the constraint story. Similar to all the other positive opportunities here, the project can add redundancies for electric and fiber, water, all the communications, gas. And the way we're doing that is through improvement of that southern corridor and also just through the nature of this infrastructure project. There's some redundancies with reducing the loads on the sanitary lines that move down Elkhorn. And I guess it's important to mention that we're proposing new bridges at Rockwell and Riverside that are going to be able to house these utilities with up-to-date infrastructure. So I'm on my conclusion slide now, so I hope I have enough time. So hopefully I communicated that we have a good plan to move the trail over through the west parts of the project. We've coordinated with the property owners. We've tried to meet the town planning guidance and have listened to the public during bike to work days and other engagements. We've really tried to incorporate feedback we've gotten from the community in this process. This session, the one previous to that, and the two other public outreach meetings as examples. And this last kind of summary here is just, again, emphasizing that we feel like we found a solution for the main project objective, which is reducing flooding. And we feel like we've done it in a way that's going to check the boxes for this BRIC grant application. So again, those are the BCA and the EHP. The completion of this project allows for looking forward to the future, so some of these next phases and project actions. So for GEI and the consultant team, we are moving into what's called a 30% plan specification and estimate package. It's going to be a pretty thick book of CAD sheets that we'll be making. Accompanying that will be a report that will detail all of our technical basis of design. So with that, we have one prompt for the board. And it simply consists of, based off staff input, public feedback, and hydraulic engineering practices, the consultant proposes to advance the current proposed concepts to a 30% complete preliminary design. That's that 30% PSE and basis of design report. So would the board wish to receive a public presentation of the final scoping project study results, which will include a technical report and those design drawings?
Absolutely, and I might Mike, you do, go, 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 go.
Well, absolutely.
You did it before.
Yeah, I do agree that we should go to the 30% and get a public presentation on it. This is a huge project of great importance. I did have one question that has never been addressed, and it's probably premature for it, but I want to understand when you're replacing the Riverside Bridge, what happens to the traffic and how long does it take to replace the bridge? That one scares me. I know it's necessary for the whole project, however. Can't do it without it. That's a key element. So can you speak to that at all?
I can. It's a major civil project. I think that the traffic delays are going to be a concern. So there's phases of the engineering design process on a project of this scale. We're completing the 30% design. So things like traffic and construction and economics impacts, those are all 60% design elements.
Of course, if that bridge washes out in some flood, the delays will be even more significant.
Good point. So where's the funding for this and what's the cost to move forward on this? And is it secured? And given that all the funding for projects like this have been frozen by the current administration, I mean, and I'm not sure it's going to be opened up again. I mean, are we just beating our heads up against the wall because there isn't going to be any brick funding moving forward, at least for 4 years?
I mean, I'll defer to anyone else who would like to answer that one.
Mayor Trustee Lancaster, I've received about 10 emails today from entities that receive or pass through federal funding, and every single one of those emails has said, we have no idea what's going on. We don't know how it impacts your funding sources. We're working hard to find out. It's advancing rapidly in the legal realm. I would caution against making future decisions based on the current turmoil today, because I suspect in the next couple of weeks we'll get some idea of what's moving forward. And we do have a local source of funding for flood improvements, and this is one of the identified major projects for that source of funding. I think the relevant question is, do we have adopted and appropriated revenues for this now, and do we expect that funding source to be secure? And I believe the answer to the 30% design efforts is yes, that's currently budgeted. Is that right? Yes. Mm-hmm. That is correct, and we don't anticipate that money being impacted at this moment.
So it's budgeted, but is it in hand? Because apparently things that have been budgeted have already been
I believe,
frozen.
and Director Mahoney can correct me if I'm wrong, it's contractually obligated, and we've already begun receiving reimbursements, as Engineer Waters stated earlier today.
Just a little gun shy of moving forward.
Yeah, I think if we
And all
ask
we
them,
end up
they'll
with is a
say,
bunch of plans on
we're
the shelf."
pretty sure, but everybody is hedging. We've asked about 3 or 4 agencies today, and everybody's hedging their answers. Most of them are saying if it's already committed, it's safe, but there is some element of risk there.
Absolutely. I would like to see a public presentation, but I just wanted to say to staff that this is like, I think we could spend hours on this. I don't think we want to do that because we'll go in circles, as we've proven to do a few times. But if we could, if we do move forward with having this come back at a public presentation, make sure it's one of two, or a single item on the study session, so we can make sure we have a lot of time to go through that 30%. That would be my request.
So an hour is typically the most time we've allocated to a study session, but we could allocate a full study session to this if the board would like. Alternatively, we could have it at a town board meeting and you could spend as much time as you want on it as a report and discussion item. The challenge with the study sessions is there are time limits on them, and if the board has relevant questions, and this is a big project, I would suggest it just come forward to a town board meeting so that you can feel comfortable with where it's at and not feel pressed for time in your evaluation of the
Yeah,
project.
that's probably the shape that we would take. And I too, would assent to proceeding forth.
If I may, I wanted to just mention that in the budgeted amount for this scoping grant. It's $547,000. 410 of it comes from public funding. And then the town has a match. We still have about $200,000 left. So I think we're not going to spend it all. But the scope of work does include these 30% design drawings and the study. So we're going to get that. And we're committed, they're committed, it's going to happen. And regarding a town board study session, the project does complete. We have to be done by April 20th. So if we don't have time to schedule in due to the other scheduling items in the next few months, if we can't get that before April 20th, it's okay. Public Works has a fund that we can use to pay this consultant team to come back and present this to you. It would be worth it. And that would be outside the funding for the scoping grant, but we can make that happen.
Well, it's an important part of the future of our center of our town. Is there anyone who does not want to move forward with the 30% complete? Yeah. Okay. Then I think we've accomplished what we need to for today. Thanks so
Yeah,
much.
appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jennifer or Greg, I will be asking for some private time to just do some drawings because I'm still confused on the blues and the yellows. And so probably 10 minutes, you'll clear me up. We are going to, thanks so much to the team for being here. We're going to take a short break, as I see on the study session agenda. We will resume at 5:45, and we'll be talking about the proposed resolution supporting immigrants. So this session is suspended. I'm going to call this study session back to order. It looks like we've got everybody back. Thanks for the patience on that. Our next topic on the study session is the proposed resolution supporting immigrants. I believe Town Administrator Mahalik will lead us through that.
Thanks, Mayor. So this is the proposed resolution supporting immigrants. The board requested this study session at your last regular town board meeting on January 14th. Really two items of direction that staff is looking for from the board today. The first being, does the board want to consider a resolution supporting immigrants in Estes Park? And if so, what elements would that resolution, would the board like to see that resolution include? You have two resolutions attached to your board packet for reference. The first one is Resolution 1018 that was approved by the town board in 2018. And it's a resolution supporting immigrants in Estes Park. And then the second one is the resolution that was submitted by the public commenters at the January 14th meeting. With that, staff is interested in hearing what direction the board would like to take and what elements, if you would like to pursue a resolution of support, what elements you would like it to include.
Who's first?
I was hoping to eat some, but I'll kick it off. I would like to do something like this. We had something before. I think it needs to be, this is a population that is critical to our community. Trustee Igo was just telling me about rumors that came up today about something going on in town that turned out not to be true, and ICE raids, and that's gonna happen. We're gonna see more and more of that, unfortunately, the rumor mill. I think it's a long resolution. There are lots of whereas statements. Most of them are just stating facts and what's going on there. The meat of it is in the part that's in the bottom and where resolved. There are a couple of things there. I think we just need to make sure what we do is within the scope of what we can do as a town, and how it applies to us. And some of it is small and might be seen as just wordsmithing, but things like the bullet point number 2, that we ensure equal access to support services and resources. I don't know, as a town, we can ensure it because it's outside of our hands. I think something like that we support the equal access to support services, or we encourage the equal access, something that's within the frame of us to do as a town, and that we're not jumping into something that is not the focus of the town. The only other comments I had was, I think number 5, adjust and create local policies consistent with the laws. I think just spread out a little bit more, consistent with local, state, and federal legislation. Not just, the laws just seemed a little general. I think there were things we can do. Most of what we're talking about, and I think our police chief will say it too, criminal behavior is criminal behavior. Whether someone is documented, resident, undocumented, a citizen, and I think we make it really clear, we have no tolerance for criminal behavior in the town of Estes Park. And if somebody is a criminal, they need to be prosecuted and whatever direction they go. And I don't really care about their ethnicity or their legal status in this country. We don't want that kind of behavior. But beyond that, I also don't want to be rounding up a lot of people just because they happen to be here for whatever reason. And that's something that I just think our police have better things to do. And it's not a threat to us, and it's not a threat to our community. And because this is an important part of our community and the fear that's there, I know during the flood, there were some issues when some of this came up at one point. Previously, when there was some enforcement going on, and I heard horror stories or scary stories to me of families kids that were latchkey kids, which we have of all sorts of types in this town, wouldn't answer the door if somebody came to the door with a badge on. And during the flood, these were firemen evacuating the building. I don't like the idea that there may be children out there who won't answer the door for a fireman knocking on the door because they're afraid, or they've been told by their families to stay away from anybody with a badge. I also don't want people being afraid to report crimes when they're victims. If someone's a victim of a crime, they ought to be able to report it, whether they're documented or not, and get the full force of our police department to find and prosecute whoever perpetrated these crimes against them, and to have a segment of our community afraid to assert their rights as a victim if they're a victim bothers me a lot too. So with some minor tweaking, I would support this wholeheartedly.
So I'm not going to support this resolution. And the reason why is not that I don't find most of the things in here I stand for, but I just think at this timing, I think it's very political, and I think it's partisan. And I think this board has to stay nonpartisan. And I just think this has that undertone, especially in the timing of it. And I understand people are all of a sudden fearful of all these things going on, and I think that in some ways it actually spreads fear. So I am not going to be in support of this resolution. I just think that with this timing of it, I think that it lends to a partisan feeling in this board, and I don't particularly care for that. So I will not be supportive of it.
I have, I have this flyer that I picked up downtown that were distributed downtown. It's a trifold flyer. It starts off, "We the people protecting your business and employees in today's world." And it goes on to talk about if ICE shows up, what do you do? And in fact, in one part of this document, it offers a sticker to put on your door that says "Private, do not enter." And what I am reading, unfortunately, between the lines of this resolution and this flyer being distributed downtown, is there's a real emotional, political situation in our country today. I think the timing of this also is, with what I read between the lines, is elevating protection or services or a wing to bring in someone who may be in the country illegally and protect them. And I don't think that that's our place. I don't think it's appropriate. The timing is troubling to me of this. The resolution that's currently on the books looks pretty, covers a lot of things that I find important in my own values. So while I support people and humans, I also am concerned about a government or an entity that has the ability to give guidance to the police department, to give legal direction in how we are going to act as a community. I think that I will be reserved, and as this is presented to us, and even with some modifications, I don't think that this is a good decision for us to undertake at this time. So I would not ask you to move forward on this resolution from the information I have and the perspective I have in the community.
I too will not be supporting this resolution. We already have a resolution on the books, as you mentioned. The timing is just, to me, it's a place that I don't feel that the trustees should be a political stance with. This other resolution was done in 2018, which at that time, it was the same type of situation. So I too, the language is just not there, even if you were to revise it a little bit. We already have one, which I think covers what it is that needs to be covered. I think this one goes a little bit too far. I'm not in any way, shape, or form, against immigrants or anything like that. I just don't think it has a place in, for us up here, sitting here, to make those political decisions. It's not correct. So I won't be in favor of it.
Well, it's gonna have to come down to all of us. It's just kind of sharing where we're at with that, which is fine. I'm happy to do that. I think I have a couple of questions actually, and one is we've referenced that we had have a resolution from 2018. Attorney Kramer, can you, or maybe Town Administrator Mahalik, when we pass a resolution, oftentimes they're for specific events or one-time designations or things like that. The nature of the resolution that we passed in 2018, what purpose does that serve us now, however many years later, 7 years later? And is it something that can be referenced? Like, what happens with that resolution? Is it still valid? Does it expire? Can you walk me through?
Sure thing,
Walk
Trustee
us through
Hazelton.
that. Thanks.
So it depends on the resolution. A resolution can be something that just happens in a moment and it's done, or it can express a sense of the board as a whole that's meant to be durable and long-lasting. It can create a legal effect, or it can be purely symbolic. It can direct staff. When I look at an ordinance, I look at the whereas clauses, but to me, that's all lead into what the ordinance is actually doing. You look at the operative clause at the bottom. So when I look at the operative clause at the bottom of Resolution 1018, it says, in order to protect the economy and stability, et cetera, the trustees urge the elected Colorado congressional delegation in Washington, D.C. to use their powers to achieve passage of comprehensive U.S. immigration reform. So that's an urging that the town board did at that time. Nothing has been passed that would contradict that. So I would take it as that still being the sense of the town board, that is something that the board urges unless the board updates that. And I'll just go one step further. If the town board were to promote specific legislation, normally we take that as the sense of the board, and we would operate on that basis unless the board told us otherwise. At a certain point, we'd have to come back to the board and say, it's been X number of years, do you still feel this way? But I think as part of this conversation, if the board wants to clarify whether that's still the intent of the board is still urging, as it was in 2018, town staff can take that direction as it comes up with our delegation.
Okay, thanks. And then this one is for Town Administrator Mahalik. We had a chance to talk about this earlier today, and I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit about it, but we had talked about where staff may or may not have direction from some of the policy kind of pieces that might be involved in this draft resolution that we have. Could you talk about that?
I'd be very concerned from a actual direction standpoint in how the proposed resolution words that, because it's so broad that we would not be sure what the effect that the board was hoping to achieve would be. So there's things like what public benefits can accrue to undocumented immigrants. That's largely been addressed at the state level with state legislation that guides what you can and cannot do. So I think without specificity there, I don't think it's fair is the wrong word, but I don't think it's fair for the board to tell staff, hey, take this very general statement and go change our policies and procedures without identifying areas where this policy or procedure is problematic. I have not run into those specific questions or concerns or challenges, so without further guidance from the board about what specific policies you'd like us to adopt or adapt, that's, I think, too broad. And Trustee Lancaster mentioned that. So that would be a concerning one if the board was expecting town staff to take action on that one directly, just given the breadth and the ambiguity of it.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot on that one. It's such a hard topic because I think it's become partisan or political. I don't even like the word political because I feel like it gets so often applied to things that, in my opinion, aren't political. They're just being alive as a human in society today. But so it's really tough because I feel like this issue has been forced to be a little more partisan, especially recently, than I think it should be. It feels like, to me, it should be a much more straightforward issue. That said, one of the things that I really appreciate about running for municipal office is that it isn't a partisan, it isn't a partisan position. And I'm thankful for that because it allows us to get a lot of work done without a lot of the extraneous fluff and chatter and things like that. But all of that said, I really appreciated the resolution that was passed in 2018. And I would be supportive of, instead of passing a new one or rewriting it or editing it, I would be supportive of referencing this standing resolution and, passing it back along to reaffirming it, not necessarily taking any action, but bringing that back to the service and bringing it back to the top to state, to me, this is a way more, I like how concise it is, and I feel like it's a snapshot of why it is valuable to us as a community, and it doesn't dip into some of those other pieces that feel a little more button pressing. That's not the right term, but I think you understand where I'm trying to go. So that's probably where I would land at this point, is reaffirming that resolution 10-18 that we have in our packet, or some way, I don't really know how procedurally that might work, versus introducing an entirely new one, which I agree with Trustee Lancaster's comments. There are a lot of things in there that I would, if this board gave the direction to move forward with, I'd feel strongly about tightening up and cleaning up and being clearer for staff direction.
Well, I'll make sure, Mayor, you have the last word. I have really mixed emotions about this. Our immigrant community is very, very important to this community in a lot of different ways. It's hard to know how many of them are in fact undocumented and how many are not. We don't know. There are certainly many of them who are not undocumented. We've seen the Citizen Project go forward here. It's a great program for this community with the people that we have from the Hispanic community. And I think that evidences a lot of the feelings of the people in the community about those immigrants. That let's figure out a way to raise them up, make them citizens, and really bring them into the body politic. I've been concerned for a long time about the level of involvement of the Hispanic community in political matters here. I don't see it very much, and I think they have good things they could add to the discussion that I wish they would show up more and really give us their point of view. And I have to say, I very much think we should have comprehensive immigration reform. I don't have much hope that it's going to happen anytime soon. And so I'm not sure that a call for it does much. But I also am concerned about interjecting a nonpartisan town board into partisan politics on either side. I saw down in Fort Collins when they got into it about the Israeli war And it gets ugly. Some of the stuff that people will, now I don't see that here. I'm not saying anyone has promoted anything ugly here. I don't think that's happened, but that's the risk when we start getting into national issues that our town board has very little input on. And so having seen both the resolution proposed by your group, I think the draft that Attorney Kramer put together for us as, no, that was just the old one? Okay, the old one from 2018. Everything in the 2018 thing, I think should be reaffirmed. I do support comprehensive immigration reform. I would suspect everyone up here feels the same way about it. And that I would like to reaffirm that 2018 resolution in some manner. It's sort of, that resolution is really pretty nonpartisan because there are people on both sides of the aisle that want immigration reform in various ways. And, you know, whether this country can ever get together to come to agreement on it is a difficult question. It seems like the biggest political football out there. And it's sad to see that because it divides us in so many ways. So my feeling is I would support a reaffirmation of the 2018 resolution.
Any other comments from the board? Travis, you probably have sufficient information there, but I'll make a couple of comments. You know, when I deal with the people that I deal with in this job as mayor, I don't think of them as a citizen or a non-citizen. I think of them as human beings. It's unfortunate that in our political climate that the partisanship runs so high, because that interferes with our basic compassion and humanity to others, whether it's a citizen, a resident, a guest, a visitor, even businessmen downtown. I'm going to welcome them all the same and hear what they have to say. If someone is abetting the opioids in the country and hurting or killing the people that get in their way, it doesn't matter to me what race or background they have. That's a bad thing. That's a bad person who does that. I went to the Sheriff's Awards in Larimer County last night and for 2.5 hours heard the stories of what happens. There's no boundaries on badness, so it's not tied into it. We have to, I understand the nonpartisan nature of the board. I was elected in a nonpartisan position. We all have our own personal opinions. But at the end of the day, as a board, we have to run the town business. We have to keep the local things going, keep the utilities going. We have to listen to the voices. We have to treat each other like human beings, regardless of what people's political views are. Listen to each other, be civil. I do like the 2018. I'm glad to hear that, in effect, that's still in force. If we choose to, town administrator, if we choose to bring that for a reaffirmation, I'm not sure it needs to happen. I think we've stated that right here at the board. There's been probably a preponderance of that who said that. It's still in force. We still want our congressional delegation 6.5 years later to do something comprehensive. And that means different things to different people. At this point, I think there's a preponderance of the board that is saying to not move forward with that resolution. That's what I heard. Town administrator, is that what you heard?
Mayor, I had 3 plain no's, 1 yes, and 3 trustees indicating a desire to reaffirm the 2018 resolution. I don't know if any of the trustees that were not interested in the new resolution would be interested in the reaffirmation of the 2018 resolution, which could take multiple forms. We could officially bring that back, or we could just, if the majority of the board is supportive of that resolution, we could just reaffirm that by sending it to our congressional delegation and let them know that the board has discussed this and wants to reaffirm the resolution therein. But I would need, right now, I have trustee Hazelton, trustee Brown, and Mayor Hall interested in reaffirming the 2018 resolution. So I don't have a majority of the board yet.
I would support a reaffirmation, and I think we should do it officially. And it just doesn't carry the same weight to send something to our congressional delegation, say, here's a resolution that's, 7 years old. We think we should look at it again. I think, and that was a different board. I think it would, even if it was identical to this one, it would make sense to us to reaffirm it and move forward. I would like to make one other comment, though, about this. I strongly feel this board should not be taking stance on things that aren't directly impacting the town of Estes Park. Trustee Brown mentioned the things going on in Fort Collins where they had protesters talking about the Gaza war, and in fact, a couple of people super glued their hands to the wall in the chambers so they couldn't be removed, disrupting meetings. It's happened all over the Front Range. I think that's totally inappropriate. And I think we actually have a policy written that we only address things that affect the community of Estes Park, and we don't get into things that aren't within our purview to take care of. I think this one falls into that because there are so many of our community members affected. But I just wanted to draw that line and let people know that if someone wants to bring in something about a war in Uganda or something here, that's not appropriate, and I don't think we should be addressing those. We should only be addressing items that directly affect the residents and the people of Estes Park and our community and our environment. And those other ones, I just don't want to set a precedent. I want to set that line. And I think this is on the other side of that line, but I don't want other people thinking they can come in with other things too, and we would entertain that because I think that's important. We are here to represent the people of Estes Park and to protect the community of Estes Park. And beyond those walls, that's not our purview. But I'd like to see us reaffirm it officially.
I feel like we have moved out of just chatting about this in a study session. If we're going to take a position on this, this will represent our community, whether it's in the community, to the delegation, whatever that may be, to the local media, to other towns that are our size or of our interest. There are a lot of towns impacted by people who are working illegally or are here immigrating, following all of the rules and going through all the steps. And I think those are two very different things. I think there's an elephant in the room that we're not covering. We've got to address how the police department would perhaps interact with other agencies. There are a lot of issues that are on the line with this conversation. And I think that judging by the public's interest and by perhaps more public interest, this is a conversation better suited for a meeting where we announce what we're going to talk about, we take public input, and we take a vote. Because I hear you asking us to vote on this issue, and I'm not supporting right now any part of it. I think that if we're going to do something with the former resolution, we need to revise some things because laws have changed. I think that we could make it stronger for the humanness of people. But we want to not tread onto legal issues that are in our face and coming up. So I think this is a conversation for a public meeting with input and a vote, and not really a consensus on a study session. And I think that that's a fine line that's been illustrated in our community real clearly, that talking about issues in a study session and making a decision is very thin ice. And I don't like the way that it feels.
And I understand that. I think there's a certain point that every study session item we have is going to have direction requested, and if the board is uncomfortable with giving staff direction, which takes a majority of the board, we shouldn't have study sessions, because or we should just define that they're for. So what I'm trying to explain is at a certain point, we can bring things directly to the board, but it skips a part of the process, and there'd be like, why are we seeing this now without having had a conversation about whether the board wants to see it at all?
Well, to be honest, that's always felt a little funny to me in this community, how study sessions give direction and set a destination for the ship, when perhaps that could be you making a presentation, us having a conversation about it, and you gleaning information from the conversation to take that direction. But when we go down the line and people say, well, yep, I'd support it, or no, I wouldn't, have we not voted on it?
So you're providing a majority of the right. So I don't see a distinction between trying to glean where a majority of the board supports. I mean, we can glean information and bring forward something that maybe only one or two trustees supported. I'd have to defer to Town Attorney Kramer.
Yeah.
I don't think there are legal prohibitions on gaining consensus in a public meeting. That's been noticed. We don't typically vote on things that are taking action. We're not voting on resolutions, but we're trying to get direction from the board, so we don't bring you a resolution that we have
Should
to
you
bring
work on it or not?
3
I
or 4 times.
understand that.
I will say most communities, they resolve this issue by having multiple hearings for resolutions and ordinances. So staff can bring you a really rough copy the first time. We don't have to go through this rigmarole during a study session, and then you have to hear it a second time to approve it. So we sort of use the study session essentially as a first hearing, so we can bring you something that is more or less what the board's looking for. I don't know if there's pros and cons to both approach. I don't have a strong preference there. But that's why you hear me trying to figure out, okay, well, where is the whole board? Because if a majority of the board doesn't support considering the resolution at a town board meeting, I don't want to waste the board's time by bringing something forward and you saying, well, there's not a majority that supports this. So when I definitely understand, Trustee Eigel, your concern about, well, it looks like we're taking a vote before we take the vote. That's a reasonable perception. And we're trying to balance the need for staff to bring forward something that the board wants to see versus not making active policy decisions in a study session. It's a relevant concern, and I think it's something that we hear frequently about from members of the public over the years. I've certainly heard from 4 or 5 people.
Well, I appreciate you going into detail. Thanks.
I deferred to Town Attorney Kramer and then didn't defer to him, so I will do so now.
And in a broader, go ahead, Town Attorney.
It's fine. Thank you, Mayor. I'll just say I do have a preference, because if the board is not giving direction but is looking for an ordinance, I end up writing that ordinance and I'm taking a stab at it. And I can do that. It's just, for my work, it's not particularly efficient if the board is going to look at it and say, that's not what we meant at all. So the more information I can glean, the more it helps me give you all not necessarily the final product, but the ballpark of what you're looking for.
And in the broader sense, there's so much national churn with the changes in administration. We're aware of that. What do we do here? Keep calm, work together, be human to each other, take care of town business, take care of the kids, especially the kids. Do the right thing here locally in every step that we take. We're human, we'll make mistakes, but we're in a good place here in town. This is a civil group here today. It's a small fraction of what we've got, but I think it represents the town well. Let's move forth. We have the power to do the right thing locally. Let's do the right thing locally. And enough said. Town Administrator Mahalik.
Mayor, I do believe that staff has sufficient direction to bring forward a reaffirmation ordinance resolution. I'm getting myself tongue-tied. a reaffirmation resolution. We'll take a look, see if anything needs to be updated, and we'll bring that forward to a regular board
Okay.
session for discussion.
And
a vote.
it'll be a report and discussion item. Is that where it will fall? Or it will fall as a resolution,
We would
actually?
bring it forward as an action item, and then if you all have significant changes, we'll need to bring it back forward because we don't typically like to
Which
edit
would
on the
mean
fly.
also there would be the opportunity for public comment on that topic at that time. So, enough said. Okay, we'll move on with the agenda. HB 241175, Local Government's Right to Property for Affordable Housing. This would be Deputy Town Administrator Dan Weber.
Ready? All right, thank you, Mayor and Town Board. I am here tonight to present some information on a bill that was passed by the legislature in their last session regarding rights to property for affordable housing for local governments. Spoiler alert, ask the question whether or not you all desire to allow us to assign the rights that we have to the Housing Authority, who effectively functions as our arm when it comes to addressing workforce and attainable and affordable housing issues. It's important to note that the House bill passed already gives the town certain rights when it comes to first refusal for multifamily properties that are already affordable, and also right of first offer for multifamily residential properties, regardless of their affordability. And I'll talk a little bit about what each of those means in some additional detail, but I will also caveat that I am not the expert on this House bill, so there may be questions I'll have to follow up on, or that maybe Attorney Kramer could help me answer. With respect to the right of first refusal process that we as a town now have as of August 7th of last year, there are certain properties that would qualify. For qualifying properties, the owner has to send a notice to the local government on 3 different occasions that they plan to sell the property that they own. One is 2 years before the expiration of the final affordability restriction. One is 6 months before. And if there is a greater window in advance of when the affordability restriction expires, there are several other times that the owner has to notify a municipality. Those are listed up here. I don't need to read through all of them now, but if you have any questions about them, I can answer them, or try to anyways. With respect to the right of first refusal and that process, when the local government is notified by the property owner, you have to move very quickly. We as the town would have to make a decision whether or not we wanted to extend our right, and if we do, we have 30 days to make a matched offer. If we don't respond to the letter that we receive, the notice that we receive, then the owner can proceed with the sale of the property. And the legislation also dictates that the seller has to negotiate in good faith, but ultimately they're not required to sell it to the government. The municipality can only use the right to preserve or convert the property to long-term affordable housing. That's another important thing. It's preserving affordable housing that already exists. With respect to the right of first offer, it's a narrower right, and it just gives the local government an early chance to make an offer before a property is listed for sale. When a market rate property qualifies for the right of first offer, again, the property owner has to give notice to the local government before they list the property. And then the bill sets forth a timeline of different deadlines that have to be met, where the owner has to provide certain information to us as a local government, when we have to respond, basically the back and forth in negotiations about making that first offer. The owner has the right to reject the local government's offer at any point, and that's why the right of first offer is described as a narrower right than the right of first refusal. The right of first offer applies to any multifamily mixed-use property that's not subject to the right of first refusal. That is, there are no affordability restrictions on it already. Is 30 or more years old at the time the owner lists the property for sale, and has between 15 and 100 units. So these are also focused on multifamily developments that have more individual units than would be required for the right of first refusal process. This is somewhat of a pilot, I would say. The bill, when it was passed, also had a sunset date, so the end of 2029, and that will allow the legislature to see how it worked, if it had the impacts that they were hoping it might have, or what potential unintended consequences there were. Municipalities can assign rights to specific properties or all properties to public entities that may be better equipped to purchase and manage the properties, including a housing authority or CHFA. And for our purposes tonight, that's a very important sentence right there. Assigning the rights maintains the benefit of the new law while reducing the local government's direct involvement. As I mentioned before, and as you're well aware, the housing authority really functions as the town's arm to address workforce and attainable and affording housing issues. And the legislature allows us to give the right that we already have to the housing authority. We as a town would maintain the ability, the rights afforded under this legislation, but we could also assign them to the housing authority. Penalties for property owners who fail to provide notice for either right of first refusal, properties that are subject to right of first refusal or the right of first offer, will get a $10,000 fine for the first offense, and then between $30,000 and $100,000 for subsequent offenses. A judge determines based on the circumstances of what happened, how severe the financial penalties will be. I expect that they're graduated because $10,000 might not be that much if you're selling a multifamily unit with 15 units or something along those lines. And I'm being somewhat speculative, but I'm guessing that judges use potential profit and things like that to determine what the penalties would actually be. So that's pretty much the information that I plan to present tonight. The question that we have before you now is whether or not you want the town town staff to proceed with developing an intergovernmental agreement that would assign the rights that we have afforded to us through House Bill 1175 to the Housing Authority. And if so, should the IGA cover both the right of first refusal and the right of first offer? From a town staff perspective, it seems to make sense to delegate or assign the rights afforded to us by 1117 to the Housing Authority, since they are, again, the entity that we pass workforce and attainable housing funds that we receive through 62 to address our local housing issues. They also have the ability to, they have funding, they have the ability to move more quickly than we might, and that's another thing worth considering. So if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but otherwise I'll turn the discussion over to you. I've got Executive Director Moulton from the Housing Authority here. If you have any questions specifically for him, and as I said, Town Attorney Kramer may have to help me with some if they're legal in nature.
Okay, I think my issue is going to be probably for Town Attorney Kramer. Is it possible to assign part of your rights and, or assign them on a non-exclusive basis whereby I can see circumstances where the town and the housing authority might not be totally aligned on whether to exercise a right of first refusal or a right of first offer. I'm not sure that would happen. It may not happen ever, but it does seem like the issue is assigning some material rights to a non-elected board. And that is something that we might want to have some sort of strings attached to. So, leave it to you.
Trustee Brown, one thing I remember from the legislation is that we can always claw back our right to exercise these rights. So that's something that would be built into the agreement as well. I haven't looked at the language with that specific question in mind. I could look into it for that. I remember that you do have to post on your website who they're supposed to send the notices to. So I'm gathering that the legislature wants to make it easy for these sellers to know who to send it to. So I'm thinking it might be that you have to either delegate it or not, rather than delegate it to multiple parties or reserve the right to exercise these options yourself. But the other thing that brings to mind is the MOU that we already have with the Housing Authority, allowing them to enter into much quicker twitch purchase decisions. And I think part of the issue, part of the reason why staff is bringing this is because we're not confident we would be able to exercise these options quickly enough to be effective. So if something came on the market, I don't know practically whether we'd be able to respond, whereas we think the Housing Authority could.
Okay, the other thing is, first of all, I think this is an opportunity for educating the populace a little bit, because the right of first refusal is all about affordable housing. The right of first offer is about any housing. And there's been a lot of confusion in our community, as Scott Moulton knows quite well, between affordable, attainable, and workforce housing. And we need to get the word out so that people really understand those distinctions. And this is another opportunity to do it. And it's also something that I think the realtors are, I'm sure they're on top of this, because they have potential exposure if they don't give the notices right, you know. And that's got to be a concern for the realtors as well. And so I'm wondering whether we can use this as an opportunity too to somehow educate the populace on those distinctions and how this works together. So.
Trustee Brown, one thing to your comments. There is a provision in this bill that requires, while it would allow an entity, us or the town, to purchase a market rate facility, we're then bound to make it affordable.
Oh, to make it affordable or
Correct.
workforce?
No,
Make it affordable.
Correct.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Thank you.
At this point, I would be supportive of staff preparing a draft IGA for us to review, and I think covering both would be what I'd like to see.
I'll echo Kirby's comments. Trustee Hazelton.
I just have a couple of questions. Does decision-making then pass exclusively to the Housing Authority? So Housing Authority has all the ability to make those calls and the town is out of it unless we claw back the, good, like creaming earlier, but clawing back. Is that our only recourse as an elected body?
I think that it would depend on the language, the specific language in the IGA. If we wanted to, have the IGA outline a process that involves the town participating in the decision-making, we could. My concern there would be just how quickly this has to move. The process is.
And I understand your objective is to take this off the town's plate and put it on the Housing Authority.
Well, I wouldn't say so much take it off of our plate and give it to them. I think we're already passing through the funding to them to make some workforce and attainable housing decisions or decisions related to those things. And so it seems like it makes sense for us to also delegate our rights afforded by 1175 to the housing authority. If the town board is interested in the town having a role, we can certainly include that in an IGA. Similar to the existing IGA that says when the housing authority develops new programs for workforce or attainable housing, it has to come before you for your thumbs up. I don't think it actually requires your formal action or approval, but you can say, no, we're not okay with that, and the housing authority then can't proceed. So we could build in something along those lines, but again, if we have a 30-day window to match, or to say that we're going to match an offer, that gives us basically, the next town board meeting to bring that before you. And we are not nimble with the 6E funds. We receive those and immediately pass them through, for the housing portion anyways, to the housing authority. So we would have to have some sort of arrangement, possibly if the town was actually engaging in the transaction, to get the money back from the housing authority. Although it probably sounds like what you're suggesting is us reviewing a notice that we receive and telling the housing authority that it's okay to proceed. Again, we could include something like that in an IGA, but I'd be concerned about timing, that's all.
Yes, I think that it would be reasonable and responsible to have some type of accountability through the town board for this, because you have an elected board that is responsible to the community, and we are. So community, the board is accountable, and we provide that the inside track to what's going on, and hopefully some trust. Whereas the housing authority board, even if they were all angels and perfect and the best business people in town, they are not an elected board. They are not directly accountable, I don't believe, to the community in the way that this group is. So I would like to see some mechanism to bring that before the board for an approval, like others that you mentioned. House Bill 241175 does create some consternation, and I know that that's not the issue that we're talking about, but for a property owner, a purchaser, an investor, there's some question or concern, because it is new, about how that will impact their ability to sell, how quickly sell, the notice requirements that are going to be here, the penalty if you don't follow the rules correctly. So I think that there's some consternation in that, and I think that although we're not deciding that, we are going to have a role in administering that, and I think that that would strengthen my ask for some accountability at this board's level. Okay, only other question is more for you, Director Moulton, is the capacity of the housing authority. You have a lot going on. In fact, you are the topic around many coffee stations and water coolers that the housing authority is moving with great speed, and hopefully impact in the long term. And I think that when I dig into things, it looks like things are going the right direction. But my concern is the capacity to take this on for the town to move this over to the housing authority. So I wonder how many properties would be subject to this, what the reality is of us doing this. There's a sunset in 5 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we give you this direction, create this, understand this agreement, this will come before a formal decision-making process at a town board meeting. Public can weigh in on it. So this is just giving direction. I would support fleshing that out, and I think it's a good idea to look at that and then give people an opportunity to. I know I asked you a question and I just kept going, and I apologize. Do you have the capacity? I know you're going to say yes, but you're ambitious.
And both of those are true.
Yeah, I know.
We do have the capacity. This, for my perspective, this is really providing notice and giving us an opportunity to step to the table. Our normal due diligence would still happen.
Mm-hmm.
We can do that quickly, analyze an opportunity, whether we think it's one that we should pursue or not. It's something that we do now on a fairly regular basis. This really just requires notice from those specific properties if they meet the criterion.
Okay.
It doesn't really change what we're already doing. It just allows us to be notified and step up to the plate if we think it's the right opportunity.
Okay.
And I just add to that, if they don't have the capacity from a human resources standpoint or a financial standpoint, then we just say
The
thanks, but
opportunity
no
passes.
thanks. Or we don't even respond.
Right, okay.
And the time
You've answered my
lapses.
questions. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thanks, Director, for giving us that information. I agree to go ahead with the IGA. I think it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a time thing. And you're already, as you stated, you're already doing your due diligence. I see it as putting it more on the seller to let you know what's coming down the pipe. Not so much for you going out and searching for those properties. So I would like to see it brought forth as an IGA to us.
I'm just curious on this. Does this only apply to municipalities or does it apply to counties as well? So if there's outside of the town boundaries, if something comes up, would it go to Larimer County or can they do the same kind of assignment? So we've got some consistency in the valley. If there's something outside our boundaries, would also go to the housing authority and we could encourage the commissioners to do that?
Good question, Trustee Lancaster. I've got the bill up. Let me just check.
Do you like that we'll all just watch you?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's
Trustee,
funny, 'cause I would assume that it's both, but I read some legal interpretations that referred to municipalities and not just local government.
Trustee Brown, go ahead with your
Yeah.
comment.
I'm sensitive to Trustee Eigel's comment, and I do think I do think it's probably the right thing to assign our rights and probably essentially all of our rights. It seems like it might be more appropriate to just build it into our annual IGA with the Housing Authority to account for maybe other things that come down the road later. But if you think it's appropriate for a separate IGA, that's fine too. I do think that probably practically it makes sense to do it, but I'd like to have part of it being that the Housing Authority would advise the town board of any notices they receive so that we're aware of what's going on because of that whole issue of political accountability. And that would give us the opportunity, should we decide to do it, to claw back. I don't see us doing that, frankly, but just political accountability does matter.
And if we required the Housing Authority to notify the town when they receive those, I do think that builds in some accountability for the town board. Obviously, staff would notify the town board, and if there were any hangups, we could proceed with due haste at a next board meeting to at least make your opinion known about, as a board, about the particular transaction.
So, thank you, Trustee Brown, Mayor and Trustee Lancaster. So the bill references local government throughout, and the only definition I'm finding of local government is a city and county, like Denver or Broomfield, or town, if the applicable qualifying property is located within the incorporated area of a city and county, or town. So it doesn't look at my glance like counties are part of this.
It sounds like it doesn't apply to the county.
So just so everybody knows, so who hires the housing authority director? I'm
The
getting to a point.
Housing Authority Board,
Right, and then who appoints the housing authority board?
the town board.
Correct. So we still have oversight, is my point. And I mean, I do like the idea of knowing the applicants that come in. That's really good. But we still have oversight. I guess I'm into going forward with the IGA. I think that we have a great director right now. That's my personal opinion. Something may come up and it may not be my opinion anymore, but because we appoint the board and then they hire him, I just think that we still have the oversight in the long run. So I'm okay with going ahead with the IGA.
Deputy Town Administrator, Do you have the information you need to proceed?
I think so. Just to confirm, I'm hearing to proceed with an IGA that assigns rights for right of first refusal and right of first offer to the housing authority. We'll bring a draft back to the town board for consideration. And the piece that I really want to be clear on is there's probably interest in requiring the housing authority to notify the town board when they receive those notices, and we can build something into the IGA that that affirms that. I'm only hearing from one town board member interest in a mechanism for formal town board participation in a decision. If the housing
Can
authority
I
receives
say that
one of
that
those
notice would be sufficient? I think that would give us the opportunity to be aware, and then if necessary. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think that was a really good suggestion.
And for future reference, you can just call it ROFR and ROFO and
I-
save a lot of time.
I thought about it, Mayor, and
Yeah.
I'm not good at talking tonight for some reason. Thank you all very much.
All right, thanks. Future study session items, I do have one that I want to mention. I've been asked by Estes Park Health to come to a study session. They want to talk about their status with the acquisition and give us a chance, the town board, to question and answer with them. And unless there is some reason or trustees don't want to have that presence, I'll get them on the schedule. And Travis can work on when that's the appropriate time to fit them in. Are there any objections there? Obviously, we need a healthy hospital. It's very important to us at the town. The other comments or study session items?
Mayor, just one, we'd like to come and talk to you about 6E childcare funding framework and updates to policy 225 at your February 25th
Yes,
meeting.
right. Any others? We'll go ahead and move to the end of this session. We will convene for the town board session at 5 after the hour, 7:05 p.m.